the importance of speaking out on humanitarian issues, including the tragedy unfolding in Gaza. I also know that how we do so matters. I take full responsibility for this mistake. That image does not reflect my views. It was an error on my part, for which I apologise unreservedly. Well, let's speak to Gary Mond, who's chair of the National Jewish Assembly. Well, he said he didn't see it. He said that he's worried about the humanitarian issue in Gaza, but is definitely not an anti-Semite, and that when someone pointed this out, he deleted it. Is that fair enough?
I think the first point to make is the fundamentals of the problem is that he's allowing politics and sport to actually mix, and that is completely unacceptable. If you have a position like he does as a major football commentator, you should not be indulging in politics whatsoever. And this problem has gone back many years, and really he should be sacked. Today was really the final straw. We already had a big problem with him in 2023 when he actually said that the policies of the then Conservative government were similar to those of Nazi Germany concerning refugees, which was tremendously offensive to every Jew in this country. And now, of course, they're actually looking at comparing Jews to rats, which is exactly what they did in Nazi Germany in the 1930s under Joseph Goebbels and Julius Streicher. It is completely unacceptable. And I accept that this is the first time he has ever apologised. I'm amazed he hasn't apologised for anything in the past. And time will tell whether we see him repeating his offences yet again. I think he should go.
Isn't the problem here as well the fact that, you know, when people engage with this sort of stuff, and especially when they're retweeting content and not thinking this is such a serious issue, because it's not just about the situation in Gaza, it's about the geopolitical situation internationally, it's about the safety of Jews in Europe. And, you know, anybody with half a brain knows that part of what's going on right now is a huge propaganda war. And so surely you should treat these matters with kid gloves. I personally, as somebody who is on television, very rarely retweet someone else or repost something if I don't know the provenance, if I don't know the sentiment or the intention of the person tweeting it, if I can't verify the account it comes from, because one of these days you're going to get in trouble. Now, when it comes to an issue as sensitive as this, where so much of the stuff put out there is from the Hamas, you know, health authority, basically their propaganda arm, where the idea is to hype up anti-Jewish sentiment using October the 7th and what's happened subsequently as the lever by which to do that, that someone in Gary Lineker's position should just think, do you know what, I'm going to leave well alone.
Someone in Gary Lineker's position shouldn't be saying anything at all. And I speak as a former international butterfly swimmer over 50 years ago. I always thought it was wrong. I thought it was wrong all my life for sport and politics to be mixed. Gary Lineker should be saying nothing about politics at all. And in the event that Gary Lineker wasn't famous, what he says nobody would would care about at all if he was just yet another Jew hater. But he's Gary Lineker. He's famous for different reasons. That's why people pay attention to him. He should be keeping his mouth and his Twitter shut.
Do you think the BBC, he's apologised now, do you think the BBC should do something about this?
They don't have a good record about doing things about anything concerning anti-Semitism. We're hearing weasel words from Mr. Davey, but we're not actually seeing action, not just on Lineker, but on many other matters as well. So I don't have much confidence in the BBC doing anything about it. My personal view is the law should be changed on the sport and politics matter that I've spoken about. And incidentally, entertainment comes into it as well, as we're witnessing the horrendous attacks on the Israeli contestant in the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yeah, did you think there's a bit of a two-tier system, for want of a better phrase, when it comes down to discrimination and what discrimination they just sort of tacitly think is fine and fair, and the other stuff that they don't? Because I think to myself, I think of a particular television star in the form, I think it was Danny Baker, and I hope someone corrects me if I'm wrong, who after the birth of, Archie, put out something ridiculous on social media, showing a picture of a monkey and saying, here's the new prince, or something like that. And he always professed that he didn't even, you know, he's just messing about and didn't actually think at all about what the implications of that might be. But of course, a lot of people read that to be an overtly racist choice of a picture. No one's heard hide nor hair of him ever since. He was gone. He was cancelled. And yet it seems to me that, you know, when you turn on BBC News, they have all sorts of dubious characters, particularly in like BBC Arabia, who have actual connections to Hamas over in Gaza, or will be repeating claims such as, you know, Israel's nuked this hospital when it turns out it was actually, you know, a terrorist organisation who had misfired a rocket. And yet it's almost like a sort of shrug of the shoulders when it comes to anti-Semitism.
Yes, yes. The two-tier disease permeates quite a number of different aspects. The BBC, the police, the judicial system, and Jews in this country are simply getting completely fed up with the fact that they're not being given the same treatment and their situation is not being considered seriously the way other minorities are. And they feel very much that they're second-class citizens. And this is sadly what's prompting quite a lot of Jews to consider leaving the UK.
I was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you've just said that, Gary, because I wanted to ask you, you might not have statistics on this, but you may have sort of an anecdotal story to tell of how many people are now doing that, because I see it as a major societal red flag. When the Jews in your country decide it's so bad they're going to get up and actually leave, then you really do have a problem.
What I can tell you is there are two age groups that are particularly badly affected. There's those at the very beginning of their careers, generally those who are either about to go to university or just finishing university, who have witnessed the horrendous anti-Semitism and are saying to themselves, this is no country for me at all to make my life in. The other end of the other type of person who are considering leaving tend to be the older generation. Those who don't feel they're physically safe anymore in this country. I'm thinking of those over 60 who've just retired. They're thinking of going to America, to Israel, or elsewhere where they think they're going to be physically safe, much more so than in this country. We haven't yet had a murder yet of a Jewish person, but I'm very, very fearful as to the future in that regard, because the violence is partly generated by these horrendous hate marches that we see regularly mounted by the so-called pro-Palestinian groups. This is what's frightening people. And as I said, the anecdote I would say to you is those two different age groups are the most likely to want to go.
Yeah, you know, Gary, I find it all deeply worrying indeed. And like I said, it's a major societal red flag when you suddenly find that a community who should be wrapping your arms around and protecting is saying, we don't want to live here anymore. It's a terrible reflection on what's going on in your country. Gary Mond, Chair of the National Jewish Assembly, thank you ever so much for joining me. Right, don't go anywhere. After the break, we're going to be